I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to the Friday edition of Conversations with Al McFarlane. Friday, we have the Healing Circle. We'll be joined momentarily by our colleague and leader, Dr. Bravada Garrett Akinsanya, who is the CEO at African American Child Wellness Center and the principal at Draken's Psychological Services and Consulting, a firm that does um, let's see, that does psychological services for our community. So it's important. I'm here with Brenda Lyle Gray. Brenda, how are you doing?
Good afternoon. How are you, Al?
I'm doing well. I'm looking at my dashboard here, and it's indicating that some of our live channels are not active now. I'm not sure why, but I'm going to, while we begin, just try to tool around and make sure that we're getting out the way that I want us to. I want to thank AZ, who is no longer with us. She's moved on to a full-time job elsewhere, but she did a phenomenal job, AZ Kirsten. So I'm letting her know that we appreciated the time she was with us and wishing her well in her undoubtedly bright and creative and productive future. In the meantime, I'm trying to handle some of this behind the scenes engineering work. And, I like doing this because this is what I do every week anyway at KFAI. When I'm operating in the studio, I actually manage the boards and pull everybody in and do all that. But this is the same kind of thing, but a little different at the same time. So I am running up with something that I'm not quite ready for, but I'm hoping that we're getting out. And if you're listening to this, you know what? If you're listening to this on social media or Facebook, let us know. Send us email, send me a text, maybe, or send me an email to McFarlanemedia@gmail to let me know that we're coming across to you. I want to double check my settings here still. It's a brand. But Brenda, while I'm doing this, you and I, before we went live, were talking about the shows we did this week, and you were particularly interested or excited about yesterday's wonderful conversation. Just feedback, just your thoughts, your reflections on yesterday's conversation with you and me and Kamal and Burnell and Youssef and Angela Rose Myers and Dr. Irma McLaren. What were your thoughts about that particular conversation?
Well, I'm always thrilled to hear different perspectives coming from Dr. Irma because after she spoke, um, she had me thinking about the Will Chris thing in another way, and then how Obama was blocked and um, the precautions that we need to take as far as talking about Clarence Thomas and impeachment. So I just, that's what I so appreciate about many of your guests is that, I don't get a chance to read as much as Youssef and Sean Lewis and the people that help me a lot because I'm writing about Minneapolis and St. Paul and I've never visited. So um, it was great. And I just mentioned to you that Angela Rose, she had gotten in toward the end. And when she spoke, it was like, okay, we're opening up another Pandora's box. She's just so on it to be so young and just so astute and just so passionate about her quest. And I loved it. It was just great. And then, of course, our classmates of, and here we are, four of us, um, and 70 years of friendship. That's
Mm-hmm.
just really big.
That's
So,
rich. That's
yeah,
rich.
it
It's
was
really
great.
rich.
It was
Yeah.
great. And I so appreciated it.
I
I
I,
really
I
did.
I mentioned yesterday that I recalled that this idea for connecting with childhood friends really came from Burnell, because once he was saying, this is back in, well, a few years ago when we were turning 65, and we're all the class of 65. And he said, Al, wouldn't it be cool if you could do some kind of a show or program or story or a book on the class of 65 turning 65? And the idea stuck in my head. I didn't get it done then, but we're turning 75 now, so maybe it's still a
We might
doable,
want to think
or
about it.
or it might be when we turn 80. But but the
Well,
but the
look at
idea is a good
Maxine
idea.
McFarlane and get inspiration. That's
Yeah.
what I told your number 7 brother, Micah. I said, y'all are so blessed. And she's probably the blessings just shower on her,
Mhm.
because when she was out there in the field, boy, she was a revolutionary.
My mom, you mean? Yeah, right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. She was something else.
Mhm. Mhm.
It
Yeah.
was wonderful. It really, really was. I totally enjoyed it.
Do you remember the what I remember from being a kid in Kansas City, Brenda, was the teas? Were you was your family part of the Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon social gatherings
Oh,
every?
yeah. Yeah.
And
And I used to model for them. Thought
mhm.
I was really something
Okay, I
for
had
some of the activities.
I
Dr.
had.
B.
Hey, good morning, or afternoon rather.
Hey,
Yeah.
Dr. B.
Al
Hey,
and I are reminiscing of Kansas City and 70 years of friendship.
wow.
Yeah, we were 5. So we had Kamal and Bernal on yesterday, and it was like family gathering. It was so good and so uplifting. That's my therapy. But one day I want to come up and get with you.
I have a couch waiting just for you,
Thank
Sister Brenda.
Just love you, Dr. B.
Love you back.
Well, the this idea of friendship is important, and I think to the degree that we're able to reach out and connect with friends and people that we knew when we were children, and people whose idea of the world was being shaped at the same time and in the same place that our own ideas were being developed and shaped, to have the chance, the opportunity, the good fortune to compare, to take notes, to clarify, to analyze, to reflect, to think about what we've come through, and to do that through the lens and in the context of what we imagined in our joy of being 5-year-olds. I remember dreaming about a world in the future when I was 4 and 5 and 6 and 7, and I remember my dreams included my closest friends in my neighborhood, which was my world at the time, but it obviously included my first cousins, Bernard and Burnell. And Dr. B, Bernard and Burnell were twins, both 6 months older than me. Their dad owned the house that we lived in and that my grandparents lived in on 28th and Brooklyn in Kansas City. The Powell House, as we called it, or the big house, was a brownstone, a huge house on the corner. And the Powells themselves lived on the first floor, and with the boys living in the basement. They built rooms down there, and then our grandmother lived on the second floor. My grandmother was called Big Mama, and so she kind of ruled. And I think one of our aunts lived up there off and on. One of our aunts, I recall, died there. One of her sisters died there, and I remember that this sister was kept kind of locked up in a room because she had uh, uh, probably suffered, we say now, dementia, but then she was just crazy, right? Or lost her mind. Let's put that way. And so she stayed with Big Mama, but she was in the room on the second floor under lock and key, and they came in and fed her, cleaned her up, cleaned her up, and set her out during the day sometimes in the hallway, and she would rock in a rocking chair, but they couldn't leave her unattended. I remember, I think I was there when she died. Maybe she didn't die at the time, but I kind of remember her rocking and rocking and rocking and rocking, and then rocking forward out of the chair. And so I think she died then. She might not have died, but that's my memory of that rocking chair being a place for her transition from this world to the next to become an ancestor. And I remember that my family lived then in the third floor kitchenette. There was a really just like a good third floor, a table, and maybe a 5 foot by 5 area, which was what the kitchen, and there was like a little half a wall behind that where there was a sink, right? And then there was one large room, which I think was my mom and dad's room, and another semi-large room, which was my sister and I. We lived in that room. There wasn't a bathroom on that floor, so we went downstairs to the use the bathroom at my grandmother's. And I remember, though, that I was very young, maybe 3 or 4. They had a potty in this little crawl space, and that's where I used the bathroom, in this pot, like a chamber pot. So these are memories, of growing up there, and then to have friends who were doing variations on the theme in their house, next door, next door, next door, around the corner, around the block. We all met each other as we walked to school. You start off with 1 or 2, and by the time you got 13 blocks of school, you had a group of 20 kids or 10 kids that all waited for each other and met each other and walked together to school. And we walked the same way with attrition on the way back, stopping by this person's house, that person's house, that person's house. And then we ended up on 28th in Brooklyn, which is where we had begun in the
But
morning.
we also walked carefully because they had burned our original school and we didn't know what to expect at the time.
That's
So
right.
we were really careful. We didn't want to be walking by ourselves.
When we were
Yeah.
pioneers, we were the environment was hostile in certain ways, and we were part of the school we went to. That Brenda and I went to. The second school we went to was one that had been a white neighborhood, and we were the first Black people there, but they burned it to stop us from coming there. So anyway, it's good to think about all of that and to reflect on it. Dr. B, what do you thought? Let me say welcome, Dr. B. Always good to see you. And you have to unmute and share with us. I'm going to pass the talking stick to you and ask you to say what's on your mind. I'm going to keep sending a note out to people too while we're talking, inviting them to join the conversation, because I sent a note saying that we're talking about the slap at the Oscars and what that means. What are the implications and socially and psychologically for Black Americans? So, Dr. B, I'm handing the talking stick to you.
Thank you so much for this conversation. And hello, Sister Brenda. I always feel happy when I see you. You're just such a light. No matter where you show up, you just bring
Aren't
that
you
light.
kind? Thank
Isn't
you.
it true? You're welcome. Actually, in our staff meeting today, we talked about what it was like to remember the first time we knew we were Black. And several of us grew up prior to integration, and that I guess the blessing of segregation at that time is that the role models you saw looked like you.
Mhm.
The postmen looked like you, the teachers, the janitors, the people who are up and down the street who worked in different fields, the doctors, they look like you. And when we began the process of integrating schools, it's when the salience of our differentness started showing up. That's when we started realizing, and I always tell the story about being a little Black girl in Texas, in Floydada, where a man named Floyd and his wife named Ada made a 4,000 person town. And I remember we would celebrate them on Old Settlers Day and seeing those toilets that said white and colored, and running into that colored bathroom thinking it was going to be pink and yellow and blue. And then coming out and telling my mom those people lied. It wasn't colored. It was white like home. And then still seeing a water fountain that said white and colored, thinking that the colored water, definitely I hadn't seen purple commodes, but I knew a lot about colored water called Kool-Aid. So I was going to that water fountain, and the white girl was thinking the same thing. She just about to turn a sprocket, and her mama said, "You can't drink from that colored water fountain." And she had a fit, "But I want the colored water. I want that colored water. So I knew it must be good. And I looked around to see if my mom would stop me. And I went there. And that's when I realized that I was Black, and that there was something wrong with being colored. There's something wrong with not being white. And what we learned is that safety, which is what we're talking about today, safety seemed to rest in our community. We felt safer. And so the conversation today about the slap at the Oscars, I think is bigger than the slap at the Oscars. It's so symbolic of how we often hurt each other while also harming ourselves. And I think that's the psychological dynamic of when Will Smith lost all of his dignity to get up to defend whatever he thought was an affront, to slap Chris Rock, and how Chris continued to still protect himself and Will by cracking a joke. So people actually didn't know, since it was so inappropriate for him to get up and do it, they had to think, well, oh, that's a joke that they're doing. And people would have been comfortable. And he wouldn't have ruined his own reputation if he'd have kept his mouth shut. And they could have talked about it later. So it showed a whole lot going on. And in our meeting today, some of the staff members were saying, well, you know, when we were little, we played the dozen. Remember us playing the dozen? I remember the dozen. Your mama's so fat, she'll scare a hungry dog off a meat truck. I mean, we talk about each other and laugh, and one would go higher, and each one would add something. But you lost the game of dozens when you lost your emotional regulation. The one who would break by fighting or hitting or slapping or cussing or, you know, and even sometimes tearing up, that's the one who lost it. And so there was some kind of, and like the Joe White, the father of Black psychology, used to say that when we had those mechanisms in place, so that when we engaged in interfacing with white people or people who would hurt us or harm us or put us down, we knew how to control our emotions. And it was kind of like a part of our cultural upbringing that we didn't even realize was serving that function. But it was functional, and it was a survival mechanism so that you wouldn't easily break like Brother Will did. He got pushed by one joke, and that joke, we don't know what preceded it. It was like a straw that breaks a camel's back, and he got pushed and he lost it. So that's what I'm thinking about when I hear you, Brother Al, and Sister Brenda talking about the origins of your Black identity and where you came from, and how to this very day you can look back laughing and smiling and having what Sister Brenda said is coping mechanisms for a world that wasn't safe. So with that, I'm going to pass the stick back to you, Brother Al.
Well, I'm going to pass it to Brenda. Brenda, what are your thoughts? Just reflecting, reminiscing. I mean, what were your impressions on the show? And I'll come back after you because I do have some more things to say about it.
On your show are the slap?
On the Oscars and the slap, yeah.
One thing that really bothered me, there was another perspective I got, and that was from Gianni, my youngest daughter. She had read Will's autobiography, and it had just come out maybe 2 or 3 months ago. And Will witnessed an awful lot of his father beating his mother. And someone mentioned this morning about Wanda Sykes had a sort of a meltdown. She was on Ellen yesterday, and she said she was just traumatized. She just hadn't gotten over it. And I think one of the things that bothers a lot of people is that Jada laughed about it. So they showed her she was tickled pink. And then they partied afterwards. And people celebrated. And then you have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, one of the most respected athletes in the world. He said it set us back years. right in the middle of Katanji's confirmation.
Mhm.
So I thought about that. Um, it just, I'm like Dr. Irma, it wasn't appropriate, but there had to be something deeper. And I think the something deeper was that Will had gone through so much and it just boiled over. I don't think it would have mattered if it was Seinfeld. That slap was going to come out. It was just, and is it, how do you pronounce it? Is it alopecia? Is that how you
Alopecia, right?
pronounce the disease?
Yeah.
That's a painful thing.
You know what,
Um,
Dr. B and Brenda, if you don't mind, I see that we're going out on YouTube, but we're not going out on Facebook. And I think this is an important conversation. And what I want to do is take a break since I see that. What I'm going to do is re-sign into StreamYard. And when I sign in, the links should be in place. And then we'll just continue the conversation. So I'll say to any viewers now, just hang tight. We'll be back on in a minute on our regular uh, Facebook channels as well as YouTube. I'm Al McFarlane. We'll be right back. Thank you. And I'll send you both the new link, okay?
okay.
Okay, all right.
So do we go out?
Yeah, close
Okay.
this out and look for the email in a couple of seconds.
Okay.
Okay.